because of the world we live in. I haven't met many of you guys already. I'll just leave it a little bit longer, see how many more people join before I hand over to our first speaker.
I think we're good to crack on.
Yeah. Okay. In which case, I'll just give a brief introduction of what's going to happen over the next couple of hours. So, first of all, we've got a talk with Robin Whitlock, who is a freelance journalist, and I'm not going to attempt to describe anything he does better than he can. So we'll be handing over to him shortly. Just a couple of little notes. If you guys have got any questions at any point throughout the talk, just because you're obviously muted and only me or Udity can have the power to unmute you, if you just write them in the chat, and then I or will be able to give you the option to actually ask your questions at the end of Robin's talk. And then the other little housekeeping note is just that the next talk that we've got is scheduled to start just a little bit later than advertised. Sophia won't actually be starting to speak until 3:15. So we'll probably have just like a 10-minute break between the end of Robin's talk and the beginning of Sophia's. So if you guys want to go and get a drink or whatever, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, without further ado, I will mute myself and hand over to Robin. All yours.
Great, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I'm Robin Whitlock. I'm a freelance journalist. I'm based in Weston-super-Mare, which hopefully many of you will, well, at least heard of, but if you don't, it's basically about 25 miles west of Bristol in southwest England. I think I'll probably better start with explaining how I got into environmental issues, because that was sort of the main stimulus for me then, getting into freelance journalism later on. So in my early years, for various reasons, I was let me see, I think probably the word is kind of lost in my life direction and what have you. So in about 1989, it was actually 1989, that year, well, my brother, who was in a sort of like similar situation, joined a local group of hunt saboteurs in Yeovil, which is was our hometown at the time. And so I kind of was quite interested in this. I'd never really thought about hunting before, and he used to tell me of the various things that he and his bunch of friends got up to, and it sounded quite interesting and actually quite exciting, really. So the next thing that happened was that I went to a sort of talk which included a video from the League Against School Sports, and this is around someone's house, a woman by the name of Jane Daniels, who was also into mainstream animal rights stuff. So when I say that, you know, anti-vivisection particularly. So that got me interested in well, first animal rights stuff, but it also got me kind of more widely interested in environmental issues in general. I think I seem to remember at the time I was already, for a bit of a hobby, going out with Yeovil conservation volunteers and doing bits of conservation tasks like scrub clearance and coppiting and all that kind of thing. And some members of the local Green Party were also members of that group. So all these things sort of started to happen more or less at about the same time. And this was the summer of 1989. And also at that time, there was a a magazine that appeared called Green Magazine, which rather ironically was published by the Shell Oil Corporation, which is rather strange. But so there was one particular afternoon which I remember very clearly, and it was a lovely summer afternoon, and I was sat on the balcony of my dad's flat reading Green Magazine, and there was an article in there about climate change and also ozone depletion as well, and various other subjects. And I don't think I'd ever really heard about climate change before. I certainly not really considered what it was or knew anything about it. And so I was reading this article, and it just really hit me. It was kind of really alarming, the sort of implications of what potentially could happen with climate change. And so then that kind of, even though I was involved in animal rights activism at the time, that very quickly became my main interest, I suppose. And shortly after that, I joined the Yeovil Greenpeace fundraising group, which was a volunteer group that used to do various things to raise funds for Greenpeace. And so it all started from there, really. And the year after, 1990, there was a book came out called The Greenpeace Report on Global Warming, which I still have a copy somewhere, but it's stuck in the middle of my book collection on my shelf, and it probably take an effort to get a copy out. But anyway, you can see it. You can find it easily on the internet, and places like eBay and stuff like that. So that came out in 1990, and it was absolutely packed with climate science. And I sort of devoured that, actually, I think, probably. And although probably some of it is a little dated, a lot of it is still relevant. So that really got me even more interested in climate change. Now let me see. So I carried on in animal rights activism for a bit. But as I did so, my interest and knowledge in climate change particularly also grew, and that culminated in 1994 when I joined. I sort of switched. I switched from the animal rights movement over to the 90s road protests, basically, which that was in response to the Conservative Party's road programme, which came out in around 1992. And that all started to kick off with a big protest at Twyford Down in Hampshire. The one that I got involved in was in Bath at Solsby Hill, the Bath Eastern Bypass protest. And I kind of got involved in that because I basically had an argument with two friends of mine who basically tried to pin me down into becoming vegan. And I wasn't really having that, really. I'd been vegan for a while, and it just didn't really suit me. But they just came on a bit too strong. So I had an argument with them. And then that sort of got me disillusioned with animal rights. So I sort of sidestepped and went off to Solsby Hill. And this was in May 1994. And so very quickly that year, I became involved in that. And that was really interesting in many ways. Also, actually quite emotional, really, because over a period of time, I was just there seeing what was a really nice sort of community neighborhood, and with large patches of green meadow turned into this this huge, great big noisy, messy, bypass, basically. But there were quite some well-known names that joined that protest. George Monbiot, for example, that's where I first met George. Tracy, the Marchioness of Worcester, got involved. Even Belle Mooney, the wife of Jonathan Dimbley, got involved, and we were kind of in close proximity in this sort of this particular camp on Balebrook Lane in Bath, and so after that, I got involved with a number of smaller road protests, including one in my hometown of Yeovil called the Windham Hill campaign. And we actually won that one because the local council, South Somerset District Council, tried to apply for government funding to help build the road, which it needed, especially because some of our little group in Yeovil had basically dug a tunnel underneath one of the car parks under where the route was supposed to go. So they needed some extra funding to get my friends out of there. But by that time, I had already started to, I'd already started an interest in magazine article writing, which started off in 1995 with an article that I managed to get published in The Lady magazine on the subject of spinning, because I'd met this local lady who's running spinning classes at the local community centre, and it was all very interesting. So, and I was following a correspondence course on writing at the time, and so by 1998, I'd had several magazine articles published, and I thought to myself, oh, I'm rather good at this. And so that was my first flirtation with journalism, so to speak. And then I kind of left it because I moved across to Glastonbury for a number of years, and didn't sort of touch any sort of writing related activities at all. In 2005, I applied to do a course at university. Basically, the sort of background to that was that I was running a gardening business at the time, and there was this one particular day where it rained constantly for 4 days, and I just couldn't get out and do any work. And I was so disillusioned that I thought, okay, right, maybe it's time for a career shift. What am I good at? And then I suddenly remembered my magazine writing activities in the late 90s and thought, okay, right, journalism sounds good. So I went down to the local career office in Street, and I said to the guy there, okay, I'd really like to take up a journalism career. What do I need? And he basically said, okay, go off to university, do a psychology and sociology degree. And I thought to myself, well, okay, I haven't got much in the way of qualifications. And he said, oh, well, that doesn't matter. You're a mature student. So if you sort of write a sort of background to yourself and you have a reference and then just ring around, you should be able to get in somewhere. So that's what I did. And Bath Spa University said yes. So I did an initial year at Bridgewater College, which was Bath Spa's partner college. And then the other years 2 and 3, I moved up to Bath. And in 2008, I graduated with a 2-1 in psychology and English. And I'd swapped the sociology bit over to English literature because I've always been interested in English literature. So I came out with a 2-1 in psychology and English literature. And but I got a good 2-1. It was 3 marks off a first, so I was quite impressed with that. The problem was in 2008, that's when the recession hit. And I spent 2 years, must have been about 2 years, applying for jobs, didn't get anything at all. I thought, okay, right, how can I get out of this? And so I just thought to myself, right, okay, I can fall back on my writing skills, tinker with that, and see where I get. So that's what I did. And in 2010, I started off, I successfully managed to get into writing odd bits for solar energy comparison websites, things like Solar Energy Experts and all that kind of thing. And it was all kind of writing about which solar panels are the best value for money, the various challenges of switching to solar panels, how you install them on your house and all this kind of thing. Around about the same time, there was another website that I started writing for called Ask the Experts, which was very technical orientated, but they were really interested in environmental subjects. So I wrote a whole load of articles for them on climate change and clean energy and so on. And then my big break basically came the year after in 2011. And I was literally just perusing Facebook one afternoon when right up in front of my eyes came an advert for a job vacancy at Renewable Energy magazine, which is basically a website that is owned by a couple in Spain. And the chap who'd been in place previously, he was departing. And so the job was for his replacement. And he literally only posted the advert up about half an hour before. So I was really lucky to find that. And so I said to the guy, okay, well, this is my experience. This is what I've done and all this kind of thing. So I got the job. And that was in 2011. And if you can see on the chat where where I've posted a load of links, there should be a link to the Renewable Energy magazine website there. I'm still writing for them. They're my main clients. I basically write for them every day. And what I do with them is mostly I write news articles with the occasional interview as well. I say occasional, I'm getting quite a few of them. So I tend to sort of space them out about every 2 weeks or so. And that forms the bulk of my my work, so to speak. Usually do my Renewable Energy magazine articles in the morning, and in the afternoon, it's basically that time I devote to sort of pitching article ideas to magazines and just hope they pick it up. And I've had quite a bit of success over the years with those. So I kind of ventured into the transport side of things alongside climate change and clean energy. I've written quite a few articles on railways, for example, which is another keen interest of mine, and also for Coach and Bus Week on a number of occasions. So my main specialisms really are climate change, clean energy, and sustainable transport. I've done other stuff as well, but that's pretty much my main area of interest, so to speak. What else can I say? Freelance writing. Okay, so now I'm also a membership secretary for Bristol National Union of Journalists. And one of the interesting things that's started to happen over the last few years is that as more stuff has gone online, the budgets for local papers in particular have sort of shrunk. And so over the years, there's been sort of like a mass of redundancies amongst staff journalists. And that means that the number of freelance journalists has increased. And that momentum looks like it's going to continue the more stuff is online. So yeah, I would say actually that freelance journalism is pretty much where most of the momentum in the journalism world is now. And that's borne out by the fact that most of the members of the NUJ are now freelancers. Yeah, it's not an easy thing though. because very much the impetus is on you yourself to get out there and look for interesting topics that you can, you know, write about, pitch to an editor, and then they just hope that the editor approves it and takes it up. So it's almost like, well, there's two things. The first thing is, it's highly advisable to have a specialist subject that you know very well indeed. And mine, of course, is climate change and clean energy. The other thing is, you've literally got to have eyes in the back of your head, because there's, you know, anything that is going on wherever in your community or on social media or wherever, potentially that could be something that is of interest to an editor somewhere as a good story. So it can be pretty full on. I would say that kind of the best approach to it really is to kind of do what I've done, and that's try and get at least one regular client. So Renewable Energy magazine pays me a monthly wage, so to speak. And with that, I can cover my rent and bills fairly easily. But at the same time, I've also got a bit of time left to do my pitching as well. So for anyone who's looking at freelancing, that's probably the best way to structure it, I would say. Yeah, right. I think I'm pretty done with that, actually, as an introduction. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. So if you want to think of any questions you want to ask me, George, or...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I do have a number of questions. And for everybody else, if you have a question for Robin, do just put it in the chat and I can read it out, no problem.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I sort of took note of here in terms of applying it to the guys that are listening is that I'm guessing quite a few of them will be doing a degree at university that isn't journalism.
Yeah.
As you did. So I just wondered about transferable skills and what your university degree in, was it psychology and sociology, how that went alongside your, be it at that time, passion, and then your subsequent career in journalism, and, you know, how can different degrees offer different things, even in the journalism world?
Yeah, I think the main thing about having a degree is that basically it teaches you to write and research properly. I was always fairly academic anyway, years before I even thought about going to university. But yeah, I would say whatever subject you're doing, university teaches you how to research properly, and that's really important, especially at the moment where we've got, you know, a sort of a big climate of fake news flying around, and so especially when I'm discussing about things, various things on Twitter, for example, which is most of you probably know is a bit of a battlefield, but I think if you really want to be persuasive in what you're saying, you've really got to do your research properly and provide evidence for the things you're claiming. And university really does teach you to do that. And also, as well, it gets you into this discipline about deadlines. I used to pride myself at university in getting each of my essays submitted at least 3 days, no later than that, before the deadline. And I succeeded on every single time. So it's, yeah, university teaches you how to research properly. It teaches you about deadlines. It gives you focus, determination, tenacity, all that kind of thing. And you very definitely need that in freelance journalism. I mean, you probably will need it in staff journalism as well. So I would say those are the main transferable skills. But I mean, there's probably loads of other stuff as well, depending on what subject you're doing. I mean, my psychology side to my degree helped as well, because I mean it gives you a sort of a very good grounding in people's behavior and the explanations for why different people do different things. At the same time, English literature, that introduces you into a wide sort of background of literary work, much of which is still cited and quoted. Shakespeare being the obvious example, of course, but yeah, I mean, in pretty much any hefty discussion, there's always going to be someone who supplies a quotation or whatever, or draws on someone's kind of, expertise. And so that's where the literature side came in for me. And of course, the other side to that as well is that when you do literary analysis, that teaches you to assess a piece of writing and really properly work out what the author is trying to say and how he's saying it and all this kind of thing. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of transferable skills from the degree course, definitely.
Okay, perfect. I mean, you sort of touched on it a little bit there, but I just wanted to press you on it. Simple question, what makes a good freelance journalist? What's the sort of personal skills or characteristics that you think you need in your particular role and that anyone would need in a similar role?
Okay, so I think the first thing is confidence. That's vital. And also, I would say tenacity. You've got to kind of be able to sort of pick yourself up after each rejection, because everyone does get rejections, and say to yourself, okay, right, what did I do wrong there? What else can I do to fix that, make it better, so that actually next time I do get the pitch. So yeah, it's a constant thing of just keep on going every day relentlessly, looking for anything and everything you can write about, pitching it, and just carrying on like that. I think basically, as well as having, I mentioned this whole thing about having eyes in the back of your head. Literally anything that people are up to. Oh, excuse me, just going to take a drink of it. Could potentially be a good source of writing for an article. And it's not just what they're up to, it's also what angle you can place on it. So there's the whole thing about the W's, who, what, where, why, all this kind of stuff. So there might be a subject that sort of seems fairly innocuous, but if you think closely about it and really observe it, then you could probably come up with something, from a particular angle that will turn it into something that is not so innocuous and actually highly interesting. So yeah, there's a thing I think about sort of basically having a fairly open mind and really looking at stuff and trying to work out how you can turn things into a profitable article that a magazine or newspaper can use.
Okay, perfect. And then sort of again on those lines, something that particularly stuck out to me when you were talking was that period around, I think it was between 2008 and 2010, when you weren't getting anything. Obviously, there were exterior circumstances that were sort of driving that. But just talk to us a bit about that period of your life, because I think maybe something that anyone that's looking to go into freelance journalism, or even just any job in the journalism world in general, may have those periods of time where it's a little bit uncertain.
Yeah, so my partner who I met at university, now she finished all her exams by May, so she was able to kind of look for work pretty instantly in May, and so she got a job with the civil service quite quickly. But I was still dealing with exams and essays and what have you in late June. So by the time I was available to kind of seriously look for work, the recession had hit. yeah, and so I looked around constantly. I think one thing I should say perhaps is that one of the factors in kind of how I reacted at that time was that I'd actually met Leanne at uni and just made the decision to settle down into a relationship with her. If I hadn't, I probably would have tried to maybe go off to Cardiff Journalism School and do a postgrad, I think. So there was a bit of a personal thing going on there as well. The downside with the other thing about Cardiff though was that the postgrad required quite a hefty fee, and I seem to remember from looking around that there wasn't really a grant that I could use that was available to help cover that. So that was another factor in not going down that road as well. So yes, I came out of university and I just I looked around for 2 years, and all that really seemed to be coming across was non-graduate jobs in call centers, well, a whole load of non-graduate jobs, basically, pretty poorly paid, a lot of it. Also, there were quite a few jobs in marketing and PR. And the problem with that is that I'm actually not good at all about around the whole issue of sales. And those jobs seem to be pretty kind of like fairly orientated on selling. So I did actually try to get into a few of those jobs, but it just didn't work. So yeah, after 2 years, I thought, okay, right, this isn't happening. What can I do to actually sort out my own career path, as it were?
And what were those steps that you took? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically the story about those 2 years from 2008 to 2010. Yeah.
Okay, and then I mean you've touched on it already, but what was the individual steps that you took post 2010 in terms of, I know that you mentioned that you saw the ad on Facebook for I can't remember the name of the
Renewable Energy magazine.
Yeah, the Renewable Energy. Exactly, it's somewhere in my notes, but I can't read my own writing. But what were the other things? So, for example, obviously, when I found you for this conference, you've got a website. There are other links in the chat. So, in terms of setting those sort of things up, just talk us, because I think they're the kind of things that people perhaps wouldn't know what to do, how to do it, and how important they can be.
Yeah, right. Okay. So yes, it is really important, basically. I mean, once you've had a few successes, it's very important to kind of build up a portfolio. So you should kind of like, you know, make sure that you collect kind of links along the way. And basically, if you can, build up a website. Now, that website that I've got is free because it's on Wix, which means that I can create it myself. I don't have to go to a computer engineer and say, you know, okay, I need this website creating, here's a bag of money, because I haven't got a bag of money particularly. So that's the advantage with, I think there are other sites like that besides Wix, but you know, if you feel that if you need a website but you feel you can't afford one, well, the good news is that yes, you can. If you go to sites like Wix, you can actually basically do it yourself, and that's really important, because if you've got a website behind you, it's the key part of marketing yourself. And if you've got a portfolio behind you, you'll see another link in the chat where there's a website called Pinterest. That's really good because that's a place where you can save screenshots of your articles with a link. So you can go to a site like that and you can actually make your portfolio visible. So after a while, the more successes you have, and if you've got your website and your portfolio together, you get to a stage where you don't necessarily actually have to sort of chase people or pitch, because some people will start coming to you. So it's all a question about reputation and getting yourself out there and known. And that certainly helps. I've had quite a few people come to me and say, okay, well, we need this bit of writing doing. I saw you on Google or whatever. Yeah. And and another thing that I should mention on that is that last year, someone found me on Google and asked me to write a chapter for this this book they were compiling. Initially, I thought I had a bit of underconfidence, and I said to the guy, okay, well, I'm just kind of a local freelance journalist here, and why would you want to? And he basically said, well, I've contacted some guys in the mainstream media, like the papers like The Guardian and all that kind of thing, and he weren't keen. So I found you on Google, and you seem to be actively and regularly writing on renewable energy. So I thought, you know, you might be a good chap to contact. So yes, I thought, okay, with this could be fairly interesting, not particularly lucrative, but apparently the book involved is quite prestigious. So I'm going to hold this up in front of the camera. So I got a chapter in this, the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Journalism. So I've got a chapter in there somewhere. Yeah, so that probably is also doing its own work. That literally came out, let me see, just before Christmas, I seem to remember. And it's likely that people will sort of find me in there as well. So I'm kind of optimistic, even more optimistic now I've got that out in the world. So yeah, there you go. It's all part of it. The more you do, the more you can achieve, and the more you can achieve, the more you're known, and then more people will come and say, hey, I need this doing. And it just grows like that.
Yeah, perfect. This is a question from Becca that's just come into the chat, and I think this is a very relevant one as well, which is, there's following on from this, how else do you market yourself, particularly when starting up without a massive portfolio? And I think what she's sort of getting at there is perhaps at the stage that some of our members are at now, where perhaps they haven't had any articles published in publications like the Renewable Energy magazine. Is there anything else you would recommend in terms of just getting your foot in the door sort of stage?
Yeah, now this is where it can be a little bit controversial. One of the things that when I first started, the website asked the experts, for example, that I mentioned. I managed to get. Then they're no longer running. Actually, I think you can still access those articles through some kind of third-party website, but that website did not pay its writers, and so the thing I would say is that although quite a lot of established journalists will say to you, never ever write for free, I would disagree with that, because the most important thing is to get your name out there and prove you can actually do the job and write, you know, efficiently, write well. So initially, I would say that if you've got the opportunity to write for free, do it, just to get your name known out there. And then when you've started to attract paying clients, then you can move away from that. I certainly wouldn't recommend writing for free continuously for a whole load of reasons. For a start off, it actually devalues the market. You know, there are far too many people out there who think they can employ a journalist for free, and whoever it is will just accept that. And that's the downside to doing that. But initially, yeah, that would be the way to do it, I think. But just don't do it for too long.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm talking sort of directly to Becca, though I can't see you, is that things like, I'm guessing you're a member of one of the publications that we have in the Southwest. So student newspapers, that's free writing. That's the kind of free writing that Robin's sort of talking about. So I would use that as an example of the kind of thing you could put in a portfolio. For example, I have a website, and I was just going to mention, because Robin mentioned Wix, another free one is WordPress, and that's also very, very good.
Yeah.
And that is an article that I wrote for a student magazine. So that's the sort of stuff that you can use with, obviously, that when you're at the stage that you're at now. Kind of the last question for me, and again, we've still got some time, so if anyone does want to, you're welcome, Becca. If anyone does want to add to the chat, please do now. But my last question is just going to be sort of like a structural one on when you sit down to write an article, Robin. Do you have a process? Are there any little writing tips that you could give us about your writing method, or however you would describe it?
Right, and when I start to let me think. Yeah, the first thing is to identify the subject and see, you know, get a feel for how interesting it actually is. You know, is a subject being widely discussed? Also, is it a subject that hasn't previously been covered? So, you know, if you look online and everyone's writing about it, then that's no good, basically. You want to find something that's fairly unique. So, for example, I've written quite a few articles for a magazine called Rail Express, which is a magazine that sort of covers a mix between the modern railway network and railway history and the heritage network. So I've written a number of articles in there about projects to reopen old railways that have been closed. And this is one example of an area where you can look around in local communities and what's happening in the industry, and sort of like seize on something that probably has escaped a lot of people's notice, but could be very interesting nevertheless. So having identified that idea, you then pitch it to an editor, having identified the publication that you think would cover it. So you know, going on to Rail Express again. So for example, I would sort of see that a particular closed line is being discussed for reopening, and maybe that project goes on to development. So I'd grab that and pitch it to the editor of Rail Express magazine, and I'd say to him, okay, this is going on, this is what's happening, and these are my qualifications for writing about it. So I'd say a bit about who I am, what my background is, you know, and why I'm the best person to write about it. And also, if you're in a position to supply images as well, so if it's nearby, you could travel to the site, maybe take your own photographs, or if not, you could probably contact the people behind the scheme and say, right, have you got any photographs you can supply to me? That helps as well. So it's all about, as well, putting a good pitch together. And if you can, getting images. And that is a good way in. You know, if you put a good pitch together, then that's a really key thing in, you know, getting the commission at the end of the day. Well, not commission, the pitch, yeah. When I say about commission, I mean, Rail Express is a good example. So I wrote a whole string of articles for them, and then the editor, and this is just before COVID sort of closed a lot of things down, the editor started to approach me and basically say, okay, we'd like to do an article on this. How would you like to handle it? So I got an article on King's Cross Station, for example, that way, you know, and that's an example of how if you start to get your name out there, people will come to you. So about pitching, so I've said some basic details about how to pitch, but you can look online, and there's some really good articles on there about how to pitch properly. And I would also recommend, if you really want to go down this route, hopefully a lot of you will, I would really recommend joining the National Union of Journalists too. That's not just because they're a union and they protect journalists, which would be really useful, especially if you're a staff journalist. They just universally act in journalists' best interest. But in addition to that, they also run courses, free courses for members very often, which will basically train you how to improve your pitching, how to improve your marketing, how to organize your tax and your budgeting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was a really brilliant idea, actually. I think that's definitely worth saying. I think we'll finish with one final question, because we're speaking on Uti's behalf because she's here. But it says, if you don't mind sharing, what is your favourite story that you've written?
Oh, my favourite story that I've written. Okay. Yeah, there's this. I can't remember the. Oh, 10, which is basically a magazine, online magazine that comes under the umbrella of this website called Medium. Now, I was on Twitter one time when two of my contacts started talking about, they started discussing a new book that was coming out by, what's his name? A left-leaning chappie whose name I've completely forgotten. Anyway, he was writing a book called Fully Automated Luxury Capitalism, which contained a whole load of ideas, for example, like sending, reaching Mars, having sort of manned space missions to Mars, and also discussing how increased automation will basically, this was the central core of it actually, how increased automation will bring about a scenario eventually that Karl Marx was discussing, i.e. communism, basically, via artificial intelligence. And I just thought to myself, okay, there's absolutely loads of holes in this. And it became pretty much apparent from this conversation that my two Twitter contacts were having as well. So I pitched it, and I got the story. So I ended up with this really good article on 10 on Medium, which was really long, but it's my favorite story because I was able to really go into quite a lot of detail. And the first draft that I sent to them, they sent back. They said, okay, it needs tinkering here and there. So they didn't just accept it, they chucked it back as well, which means I really had to work on it and develop it and really get the message right. And so that's probably my favorite, not just in terms of the detail, but also the process that I had to undergo to make sure that it was a really good, interesting story.
Great. I just looked it up. Aaron Vastani. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah. Yes, you know the guy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will just talk slowly for 30 seconds here, just to give anyone else a chance to put a question in the chat. Otherwise, we will start to wrap up because, well, we've gone on for the 50 minutes and more. So I will continue to talk slowly, giving anyone the chance. But I don't think so. I think, thank you, Robin, for everything that you said. I think it's been a really, really informative talk. I hope the guys that are listening agree. Becca says thank you. So yeah, I thanks a lot. And for everybody else, we'll mention again in the chat there are some details, so you can see some of the stuff.
Can I just say one more thing? Actually, yeah. As I said, previously, I'm fairly accessible on Google and social media. So, if anyone wants to get in touch with me anytime down the line and ask me whatnot, please do. I'll always be very keen to help anyone out and, provide advice and information and all that kind of thing. So do get in touch if you want to.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to advertise that on you, for you. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah. So just to everybody else, we're obviously going to bring this meeting to an end in just a second. And as I mentioned at the start, if you didn't listen, there'll just be a little gap before the next one starts. So the call will probably be open for about 3 o'clock, but I don't think Sophia will start talking until closer to 1:15. So yeah, go away, get a cup of tea, whatever you like, for about 20 minutes, and the next talk will be starting shortly. So yeah, thank you again, Robin. Thank you so much. And
Okay,
I'll
my
see you
pleasure.
guys in a minute.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Cheers now.